When Rolex decided to release their new models on September 1st of this year, the watch world really went up in arms over the new releases. And then, probably just split seconds after the announcement, prices for the Rolex Submariner Hulk skyrocketed on the grey market as it was being discontinued when they introduced the sort of replacement for it, the 126-610 LV Submariner Date, aka the Cermit. But was that a mistake? Before we are going to answer that question, I want you to take a step back with me and really look into what actually changed with this new Submariner Date that we have here. The first thing you'll notice are obviously the colors. Instead of the vibrant green sunburst dial, we have a lacquered shiny black dial with added chromalite for making this one readable in the dark. On top sits a green bezel that we all know too well. I couldn't tell from the pictures before, but now I am 100% sure this is the exact same green bezel that has also been used on the Hulk that got discontinued. It's the same kind of dull-ish green color that becomes lighter depending on, well, the light source. The same goes for the bracelet, a solid brushed 3-link bracelet that looks smooth but not too delicate. So far it's so good. A black dial and a Hulk green bezel like flower prints in spring. Not really groundbreaking given that we have seen this before. But when you look closer, you'll start to notice the changes on the case people had the most heated debates over online. Because when Rolex announced that their new Submariner line is now going to be available in a 41mm diameter only instead of the previous 40mm, some people really freaked out. And because of that, I really want you to look very closely with me here because I was a bit taken aback when I noticed this. Given the drama surrounding the new case design, I wanted to check how those changes are actually going to affect the watch in real life because, well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm always having a hard time picturing those changes by just reading the measurements on paper. And now, please look. Let's start with the first measurement, the actual diameter. One of the few dimensions that is really going to affect you when you are wearing this watch is as follows. The discontinued Hulk from one end of the bezel to the other measures 40.2 millimeters in diameter, and the new Cermit measures, believe it or not, a whopping 40.5 millimeters in diameter. If it wasn't for the measuring tool, I would not have been able to tell these two apart diameter-wise at all. In terms of heights, they're exactly the same, 12mm from the case back to the crystal. The same goes for perhaps the other most important dimension that actually affects how a watch wears on your wrist, the lug to lug. The Hulk measures 47.6mm here, and the Cermit, well, you might have guessed it, exactly the same. There you have it. They're both pretty much the same height or thickness, however you want to call it. The same lug to lug and roughly the same in diameter. The only two really distinguishable measurements can be found at the clasp and at the lugs themselves. The old clasp on the Hulk is slimmer with a width of 17.63 millimeters, whereas the Cermit measures 18.83 millimeters on the clasp. As we know, Rolex has reshaped the flanks and lugs of the new case, so that not only leaves us with a new silhouette, but also with slimmer lugs in general because of it. The new Cermit now measures 26.7 millimeters, which makes this almost 1 millimeter smaller compared to the Hulk, which measures 27.5 millimeters here. I think by this time, it's safe to say that the 1mm increase in diameter, according to the website, does very little to the overall look of the watch. The culprits for the updated look are definitely the flanks, which automatically lead to slimmer lugs. I would say that this new look, though there's still the diameter increase on paper, resembles much more the slimmer looking subs from decades ago that people will still lust over all this time, so I think that is good news. Possibly the biggest change though happened behind closed doors, or perhaps I should rather say behind closed case backs, as the Cermit has been updated with a new movement, the 3235, and it's round about 70 hours power reserve. Though it's the biggest change, it's probably the least surprising as this was long overdue anyways. And so that is that. You've seen the similarities and the differences. You can see how it actually wears on the wrist. But why is this one in particular causing so much fuss? Well, let's roll it back to my question from the beginning. But was that a mistake? Well, let's put it that way. In regards to the new case, I think it is safe to say that given its new design and silhouette, it feels and looks a lot more like those vintage subs many love. And it's definitely cool to see that those changes really show on the wrist too. I mean, that's ultimately where it matters the most, right? But with this one, the issue goes much deeper than just the look. Given that the Cermit is now an inherent part of the Rolex Submariner lineup, it still feels weirdly out of place. It is simply a black dial with a Hulk bezel popped onto it. It's nothing new, not even color-wise. We've seen this one before like a million times, probably at every sales department convention. But then again, when offered at an AD, I think 99%, including probably myself, wouldn't turn this one down simply because prices are through the roof for this one already, and that is the whole problem. This is why this release has been so polarizing. It isn't really about the color scheme in general. It's more about what this means in terms of prices, availability, and the politics behind the Rolex game that makes people get so up in arms about it, and rightfully so. There's a writer called Owen Feltham who put it quite nicely. He said, "By gaming, we lose both our time and treasure." And I think this is where many are right now with this watch. It has sort of become the symbol as to why many started to turn their back on Rolex. I mean, luckily for Rolex, there are just as many, if not more, who are facing the other way, so they're not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, Rolex could probably release lots of things without having to worry, as their core fan base seems to be absolutely unbudgeable. Another good thing is also that they have started to send out particular watches from the new releases to ADs, so we are able to see them earlier in person than we expected. Though you might have guessed it, they are not for sale yet. It's look, touch, but don't buy. It's like a very bizarre strip club from a parallel universe, I guess. Can I say that? I think time will tell if this approach turns out to be more of a mistake than a success, but what do you think? Was it a mistake?